Okay. Hello, everybody. I am Sally St. George, and I am a Taos Institute um, board member, as well as a co-editor-in-chief of the Qualitative Report. And I'm so excited to be here, and I wanted to let you know that I also come here from the traditional, or I speak to you from the traditional unceded territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. And this is so exciting today because my two roles as a Taos Institute board member and part of the Relational Research Network and the qualitative report come together. So let me just say one more sentence about the Relational Research Network, which is a network, part of the Taos Institute, and it's a group of people who are very dedicated to relational research, conducting it from a relational perspective, as well as making sure that the relationship is centered, as well as promoting other projects, organic, whatever, having high schoolers come together and present their research. So this is very exciting that we can share research that we come to know about that we previously didn't come to know about. So I would like to introduce Alexa Muse. And Alexa is a very special person, has a very special role in today. She is both a supervisor and teacher, as well as a PhD education candidate at the University of Oxford. She's a high school English teacher at Lexington High School in Massachusetts, USA, has 11 years of middle school, secondary, and university teaching experience, both in the United States and as well as in Turkey, Russia, and the UK. Alexa is interested in the intersection of democratic education pedagogies, policy, and teacher contexts. Other interests of hers include cultural historical activity, theory, figured worlds, and narratology. So, Alexa is a very important part of this group since she's the supervisor, teacher, journeying along with an incredible group of students. So Alexa, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Hello. And just to reiterate the part about the incredible group of students, the students who you are about to see today have led, designed, and just completely outdone any expectations that I had, resulting in their project on ChatGPT. These students were initially in my 10th grade English class, as you'll learn in a second, and enjoyed a project related to publication and the research process on ChatGPT, so much that they chose to continue the project through their senior years. And now, as they get ready to graduate in 1 month, just a little bit over 1 month, it is the privilege of my teaching career to introduce them to you. But something I really want to emphasize to everyone is that they did the writing, the reading, and this is not, this is a graduate level project from some extraordinary students. And I cannot emphasize enough that the language and theories that you are about to hear come from years of reading Dorothy Holland, reading James G., full texts about Vygotsky in order to create, in order to share student perspectives that I think we wouldn't get to hear otherwise. So I will let Vivek and Saisha take it away.
Thank you so much for the incredible introduction, Ms. Muse. Your support and the support from the Taos Institute and the TQR have been invaluable in our process. Yeah, we're also very excited, so let's just get started. Our presentation is called A Teacher, a Tutor, a Friend, ChatGPT and the High School Experience. We are the Lexington Student Research and Publication Collaborative, and before we start, I'm going to go around and introduce ourselves pretty shortly. So my name is Vivek, and I'm passionate about changing the world through computation. I co-captain our VEX robotics team, I pursue research in computational biology, and I love teaching, creative thinking, and problem solving. In the future, I hope to use my skills and knowledge to develop solutions to positively impact the world. Next year, I'll be attending Carnegie Mellon University for computer science.
All right, to echo Vivek, thank you everyone for coming to our presentation. My name is Saisha Gupta. I'm also the co-head researcher for the Lexington Student Research and Publication Collaborative. I'm really interested in the field of medicine, and I'm the co-president of LHS's Medical Club. I'm committed to New York University for Global Public Health and Chemistry in the fall, and I hope to explore the field that we discussed in our research as well as more of a medical aspect in the future.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Cam, and I am a senior in high school, and I enjoy reading.
Hi, my name is Gwendolyn Lawrence. I'm a sophomore at LHS. I'm on the varsity field hockey team here at LHS, and I'm a peer mentor through the club Best Buddies. Hi, my name is Anya Kavetti. I'm a sophomore at LHS as well. I'm a defensive specialist for the JV volleyball team, and I am on the varsity policy debate team.
Hi, my name is Angela Xie, a sophomore at LHS. I'm a middle blocker on the JV volleyball team and a varsity policy debater.
My name is Matthew Posada, and I will be attending Oxford College of Emory University with a plan to study sociology, specifically health inequalities.
Hello, my name is Alejandro Castro. I'm a senior at Lexington High School, and I will be going into materials science and engineering next year.
Hi, my name is Caroline Eamon. I'm a senior at Lexington High School as well. I'm interested in a lot of the intersection between chemistry and environmental science and engineering. I still don't really know what I want to do, but something along those lines. And I'm part of the Lexington's Envirothon team and our Science Olympiad team. So a lot of STEM.
Hi, I'm Emily Kwong. I'm captain of the illustration club here at Lexington High School. I am a cellist in the Lexington High School Chamber Orchestra, and I'm committed to Harvard College for neuroscience and psychology next year.
Next slide, please.
So our research followed a very traditional research format in the structure of our paper. So throughout the presentation, we're just going to be following the same order we presented our research in our paper, starting from our research question and moving down to our conclusion.
As this piece mentioned before, we definitely started this project investigating student perspectives on ChatGPT, but it took a while to get to that point. So throughout the year, we started with learning about grammar and memoirs, language and oppression, and then slowly built up using G's identity theory as you created research questions in class. What was most interesting is that we had a series of 5 essays in which we individually got personalized feedback with Ms. Muse, our teacher, and that helped us evolve our own writing skills. Towards the end of the project, we evolved into more of a student-led project where we formed hierarchies within the classrooms to have effective communication and navigate tasks that had to be done for the project. And all of this, the entire time, everything that we did was following the Massachusetts state standards for teaching. So we were still getting all the necessary things required in the curriculum.
Post our graduation of the 10th grade class, a passionate subset of students decided to continue the project. And throughout the summer after the sophomore year and into junior year, we continued developing our paper and refining our research from a collaborative work of 50 students to more so around 20 to 30 students. And finally, after the rigorous process, 17 people from the original 2 classes stuck with the project to the end. We initially met 1 to 2 times after school, and eventually we committed to meeting out of school as well to finish our research. We recoded and we rewrote the paper from how we had originally done it to make it more cohesive, which was about a 1.5-year process. We continued to refine the paper for admission to journals until we were grateful to be accepted into the qualitative report, and revisions for the paper for the qualitative report took about a year long.
So our research question was, in what ways do pressures within high school communities influence students' perspectives on justifying or rejecting ChatGPT use? In our experience as high school students, pressures are a pretty big motivating factor, and we were just interested in investigating the ways that that influenced students' conversation around AI.
So our literature review consists of 3 subsections. The first covers existing literature regarding ChatGPT in high school education, which provided valuable background information and insight into the extent of ChatGPT use within high schools. The second subsection covers the limitations of these papers, focusing on power imbalances between adult researchers and student participants, and the questionable authenticity of participant engagement as a result of said power imbalances. And the final subsection of the literature review covers the influence of a stressful high school environment on students, which Caroline will expand upon in the next slide.
Thanks, Matt. So to put the experience of our interviews into context, we need to kind of set the scene a little bit. So all of us, as well as all of our interviewees, attend Lexington High School, or attended, which is a public high school of 2,000 students in Massachusetts. But we aren't really your average public high school. Last year, the school ranked 3rd of all high schools in the state in the U.S. News and World Report, and Harvard Student Newspaper even dubbed it a Harvard beater school. These are indicators of the very high achieving competitive academic culture here at LHS, and we as students can speak to the school expectation to receive high grades, take advanced level classes, and practically innovate ourselves in extracurriculars, despite the community's efforts to reduce student stress. And this is reflected in the school's biennial youth behavior survey, which includes questions surrounding student mental health, and it shows that the majority of students agree with our evaluation of the environment.
Okay, so throughout this whole process of the paper, we were uniquely positioned as both students and researchers. So during interviews, we were naturally positioned as fellow students because we attended the same high school as the majority of our interviewees. And as researchers, our goal was to objectively and accurately analyze the data we collected to discover student perspectives on ChatGPT and general AI as a whole. And one of the challenges for typical adult researchers in conducting research in high schools is the power imbalance between between researchers and youth participants. And this is worsened by the age difference. And in addition, the student participant may position the research figure as an authority figure. However, since we were positioned as students of similar ages alongside our participants, the effects of the power imbalance were minimized in the interviews. And in addition, the majority of our participants, as I already mentioned, attended the same high school that we do. So we could connect with our participants over shared experiences. And since we were more familiar with their experiences, we were able to ask more specific questions that could reveal a fuller truth of the student's perspective, which we did through semi-structured interviews.
So the framework that we used to approach our analysis sort of was a meshing of 3 different main concepts. So the first is social goods, which describe the value system present within a society as a collective. The second is positioning theory, which is discussing how a person positions themselves and how others position somebody within a constructed world, with those positions having certain rights and obligations that go along with that role. And the last idea is figured worlds, which sort of describes how a unique context is constructed through the unique reactions between the layers of everything that the people and space have experienced and have brought together.
And this led us to some questions that guided our research. For social goods, it was what do students value? So what social goods they identify as as a student body. And then for positioning theory, we were curious in what ways administrators and teachers position students and what duties and obligations this position entails. So should students be focusing only on getting high grades? Should they be focusing on being academically have high academic integrity? What kind of things does that entail? And then for figured worlds, just kind of what figured world students belong to and how that influences their interactions between the students.
So as I already stated, or as Vivek already mentioned, we started this project in the 10th grade which we conducted 50 interviews, and then we selected 24 of these interviews for analysis. All but one of the interviews that we analyzed were students at our high school. They're all aged 14 to 17 and attended an affluent suburban high school in Massachusetts. And as I mentioned, we employed a semi-structured interview approach, which was the use of open-ended reflective questions, and they allowed the interviewee to interpret the prompt within their own worldview. In addition, we were also given a list of questions that we could use, but we were not necessarily forced to use, so we could choose to elaborate on certain questions or not. And this whole process allowed for the construction of the interviewee's knowledge and perspective within the specific figured world formed by the interviewee and the interviewer. And additionally, the student researchers interviewed the participants in their location of choice to maximize the authenticity of their responses. And the reason we had such a large sample size for the interviews was to minimize the effect of potential inauthenticity, such as falsified interviewers by co-researchers in our 10th grade class. However, the student-led nature of the project encouraged high levels of academic engagement, and because the interview and analysis were marked, and per our teacher's zero tolerance ChatGPT policy, it was less likely for students to plagiarize or fabricate their own interview data, so we do not believe this is a significant factor.
And then for ethics, we had 2 domains, one for us as researchers, and then the second one for our participants. And for these 2 domains, we followed the AERA ethical guidelines. And for us as researchers, we gave verbal consent. Our parents also gave consent, and our school's English department approved of the project. And for the assignments related to the paper, we were given the option to opt out of those assignments and complete something else. And this decision would not impact our grades. But in the end, none of the students decided to opt out. And then for our participants, they gave a verbal consent before the interviews, and they were also able to opt out after talking in the interview. And during the interviews, we avoided talking about personal or traumatic topics, and it was conducted in a low pressure environment. Then after the interviews, we deleted the audio recordings after we transcribed them. And we also kept our participants' identities confidential by giving them pseudonyms, which you'll see later, which is a random letter in the alphabet.
Yeah, so now let's move on to the coding process and the analytical process. Now this is a long and arduous process. So we created a figure to kind of explain how we went about this. So the first thing we did was based on our theoretical framework, we coded for themes, language features, and other discourses. From there, we took that and we distributed into 2 buckets of justifying, represented with a J, and rejecting, represented with an R, of ChatGPT usage. As we continued on this process, we realized that the justifying and rejection categories weren't enough. So we introduced a third, a miscellaneous category, to challenge the binary nature of these categories. But the problem is that it still showed a lack of the interdependence between these different effects. So our solution was to now reorganize the structure to focus on the social goods. So in the end, our final structure, which Matthew will bring you through, identified the intersection between pressures and social goods.
Using this new method of coding, we looked for common themes between interviews regarding the social goods and the pressures that influence them. Here's a list of the most prevalent ones that we saw in interviews. So our final chart enabled us to connect pressures to social goods in a non-binary way, and even social goods to each other. And then, for example, the next slide, one of the most common social goods that we found in interviews was the social good of attaining good grades. The colors blue, green, yellow, and red correspond to the pressures of parents, peers, teachers, and schools, respectively. The letters refer to individual interviews, and the corresponding color refers to their corresponding pressure. And in this example, we can see that some participants even linked the social good of grades and quote unquote good colleges together.
To lift some of the weight off the shoulders of the seniors, we, the sophomores, were tasked with drafting parts of the paper. Our main focus was the social goods aspect of the paper, and our contributions were centered around drafting these parts of the paper, as well as some of the sections of justifying and rejecting ChatGPT. On top of this, we were tasked with editing the paper, and we worked collaboratively with each other and the seniors to continue the process. So the first step of our contributions to the paper was reading a series of very dense literature that provided us with the background knowledge and for the framework of the paper. So it gave us information on figured worlds and social goods, and these documents would serve as a basis for helping us understand the paper. Angela and I were fairly familiar with the language present in the literature due to our debate background and the nature of debate, especially with identity arguments. So we had heard phrases like epistemology and spheres of influence, and this allowed us to efficiently implement the ideas from the literature into our writing. But Gwen also had her own reasons for being more comfortable with the literature. So though I don't share the same debate background that Anya and Angela have, I'm an avid reader and was more comfortable with this material despite it being very dense. I've read many nonfiction books that use similar language, so it was more familiar to me.
As Anya mentioned earlier, these documents would serve as a basis for helping us understand the framework under which the paper would be written. An integral part of our writing process was really just bouncing thoughts off of each other and brainstorming ideas before writing them down. It was all a very dialogical process. All of our initial drafts really just transcriptions of these discussions.
Yes, so like Angela said, we were very collaborative, and when we would write together, we would merge all of our ideas into one piece of work. So when we wrote, it was not divided. It was not a process that we divided up amongst ourselves.
As you move into the findings, I just want to reiterate that we found that students' association with ChatGPT with the attainment of certain social goods informed the way that they positioned its acceptability for either themselves or their peers. But we also found that the social goods themselves were shaped by pressures that students found in their various figured worlds. So the intersection of pressure goods and social goods are important because they influence the way in which students define acceptable and unacceptable ChatGPT usage.
And then we this is just to like detail how our framework fit into our findings. I wanted to do a quick little run through. So for social goods, as discussed earlier, so to kind of the structure behind our entire analysis. And these included grades, learning ethics, and so on. However, each participant identified different social goods as prioritized over others and valued had a different hierarchy of valuation. And this sort of prioritization informed what choices they made in regards to ChatGPT usage. For positioning theory, we used a lot of it in our analysis. For example, in a recurring storyline that followed a student as they navigated high school and balanced all sorts of pressures and expectations put upon them. Then, of course, our interviews were all students, and they're positioned as such by their teachers and school administrators. However, when identifying the duties that the position entails, they discussed a variety of responsibilities from getting high grades to developing their own personal sense of writing. And so that kind of what they perceived to be the role of a student was really interesting and really impactful in their decisions. For speech acts, they're utilized more on a case-by-case basis. As specific connotations they attach to their words help us understand how that participant positions both themselves and others. And then finally, Finally, figured worlds provided kind of the context in which all these positions and social goods fit. We examined all sorts of figured worlds discussed by our interviewees, from their English classrooms to their home parent interactions to their friend groups.
So high grades were one of the most highly valued and also common social goods that we found during our research. And we defined high grades as A range grades, which was influenced by the interviews where students sort of identified high grades as A range grades. For example, interviewed Z mentioned A range grades specifically, and they also associated high grades with academic success as shown in interview H. And we found that the highest pressures and the most important pressures for getting high grades were parents and guardians, especially in regards to achieving future success in terms of either tertiary education and high caliber colleges and universities, and just future success in general with careers and stuff like that. And the second biggest pressure that we found was peers and just the school environment in general. So one of the biggest reasons that students justified ChatGPT through the lens of high grades was improving grades and achieving the social good. So for example, struggling students were found to be more likely to use ChatGPT to improve their grade and achieve the social good. But on the other hand, a lot of students rejected ChatGPT for a very similar reason, because they felt that the low quality outputs of ChatGPT and generative AI were not up to the same caliber that teachers expected, and they actually prevented them from achieving the social good. And so for that reason, most of the students actually rejected ChatGPT through the lens of high grades.
So our participants defined learning as the acquisition of knowledge, critical thinking, work ethic, and writing skill in general. So a student in general has the obligation to learn as a part of their position, and that obligation, fits into a student's storyline wherein they will gain success in the future because of the skills that they've acquired through the learning they've done as a student. And this is exemplified by participant R. As you can see on this slide, they say that the real benefit of learning is the practicality and how much you'll actually use in this life. So and big emphasis on the skills that are acquired and the ways that those skills will be used in the future. So this ChatGPT student learning success storyline is really key to the justification and rejection of ChatGPT in the case of learning as a social good. So views which favored rejection felt that AI would be an obstruction to learning and would then disrupt that storyline, so would hinder their success beyond high school. In other words, yeah, it would be an obstacle between students and the learning and success. Those who justified the use of ChatGPT felt that AI would actually help to expedite or otherwise facilitate the fulfillment of the student success storyline. They felt that it could be similar to a search engine like Wikipedia or Google, and they felt it could also help with their learning by providing efficient summaries on topics that they might be researching. Interestingly, there is one student who said directly, just straight up, that they felt that AI or ChatGPT could help them improve their critical thinking skills. So there's a very different, wide-ranging kind of a wide range of views that students have on how ChatGPT will influence their learning. And yeah, so the main difference between those who rejected and or those who accepted ChatGPT viewed AI differently in relation to the storyline of a student.
So our participants define efficiency as reducing the amount of time and effort spent on tasks, and they described it with words like efficient, saves time, faster, easier. And for example, in this quote from participant P, they say, sometimes I'll look for easier ways to do stuff. And that shows how they value efficiency, and they value efficiency in a specific scenario, especially if it's in a class I'm not interested in. Sorry. For pressures, we didn't find any direct pressures like from parents or peers, but we found non-direct pressures such as the expectation to be involved in many activities and to get high grades. And with these high expectations, it becomes overwhelming, and as participant DD says, it just becomes pretty hard to balance all this stuff.
So some participants justified ChatGPT by saying it helped them with saving time when completing tedious tasks. They stated it could aid with writing essays and paraphrasing long material, which could likely save time, especially for students who participate in extracurriculars such as sports or some of the many clubs here at LHS. Um, it would just save so much time, as said by participant K. Additionally, some participants justified the use of ChatGPT by saying it could be used by teachers to create lesson plans. Other participants rejected ChatGPT and expressed that it went against their other social goods such as ethics, even though it may take less time than creating original material. People can think of it as a shortcut for creating an end product, as said by participant R, emphasizing how some were hesitant when using ChatGPT due to concerns of an ethical standpoint or consequences that came with the use. Next slide. So participants defined ethics as work produced by the student's original thought, and institutions that played a defining role in students' lives, like teachers, schools, and administrations, teach students from a young age that moral integrity and academic honesty are integral social goods. After ChatGPT's release, there were specific narratives promoted about the usage of AI, specifically that it equates to cheating, and that conflicts with acquiring the social good of ethicality. So in response, schools amended their policies in response to AI usage. There have been potential administrative consequences that could occur. Teachers have introduced programs that track document history. And there's also just an automatic threat of a 0 if AI is detected. So some pressures that on students that we found were parental pressure. We found that, like participant V stated, that parents would be upset if they found that their children were using ChatGPT to complete their schoolwork. On top of this, there was societal pressure as well as pressure from teachers on students to produce their own authentic and original work. In a student-teacher discourse, one of the duties teachers expect of their students is to produce their own work. So we did not find any ethical justifications by our participants for the usage of AI to complete schoolwork, but we found numerous domains for rejecting ChatGPT. So first, for cheating, students considered the output of generative AI as a form of plagiarism. They had the perception that the generative AI usage is a form of academic dishonesty, and so they wanted to position themselves as good students by meeting their teachers' expectations. On to unfairness, students also felt that the use of ChatGPT to produce academic work offers an unfair advantage, as other students may not have access to the program, or other students will not use the program to produce their own work. So this also positions students who don't use ChatGPT as good students who are not unfairly using the program. Finally, student responsibility. This violates the responsibility that students owe to themselves as well, because if they can't undergo the effort required to produce work ethically, they are again violating their position in the learning process, and they're not completing their storyline as a student in the academic sphere.
So, participants define humanity as an individual's own intelligence or emotions, or being distinctly human. We were unable to deduce pressures that inform the social good as participants discuss humanity in intrinsic terms rather than in response to external pressures. No students justified the usage of ChatGPT in the context of humanity due to the artificial nature of the program. And in terms of rejecting its usage, some students cited concerns with the originality of ChatGPT generated work, arguing that the generated responses lack the individuality and creativity found in human-created writing. Participants say that AI cannot express feelings or emotions, and it cannot convey sincerity. Value for human authenticity therefore motivated students to pursue development of their own style, thus rejecting the usage of ChatGPT.
As we recoded to account for different social goods, we developed the social good of a sort of superiority, and we defined this in participants who mentioned independence, valuing independence from using outside sources of help. For students who mentioned the quality of the work, either produced by students or produced by ChatGPT itself, and establishing a sort of comparison or a dichotomy between the AI as well as the student work. So the most common pressures mentioned within this category were pressures from parents to succeed and competition between peers. Some participants cited that pressure was a healthy mechanism because it encouraged students to do better, either for their future success or as a means of holding themselves accountable. Within the justifying ChatGPT category, one student thought that you could justify ChatGPT if you believed it produced a superior quality of work than the student could by their own merits. However, the majority of students ended up rejecting ChatGPT within this category for three main reasons. The first being a fear of developing a dependence on ChatGPT at the sacrifice of academic success with assignments in which the use of AI is impossible, such as standardized tests. One student even cited an example of medical school. Secondly, the idea that individual work is overall higher quality than ChatGPT generated content, as well as the belief that they do not need assistance from ChatGPT or outside sources in general.
I think my favorite part about our project is this snapshot section. And in this section, we're basically examining 3 individual participant narratives that emphasize the interplay between different social goods. So our student-to-student connection with our participants allowed us to become microphones for them, which amplified their own complex experiences. So this allowed us to engage more authentically with the nuanced facets of their experience.
So first we're going to talk about participant S, who we named the pensive philosopher because they just spew these highly insightful comments all over the place. So first of all, in the first quote, we can see they describe the social validation that one gets when they receive high grades. And oh, that's not on the slide, is it? But it's how you tend to compare yourself to how other people are doing, and it feels good if you're doing better, as I said. And that kind of describes how there's like a social component between for getting high grades and how you feel superior. Despite this, though, they appear to prioritize grades the most, instead positing learning as students' ultimate goal and achievement. And the second quote shows that, and it's probably one of my favorite quotes in the entire paper, where they say, learning something new is always a sign you're improving as a student, so that should count as success, right? And that just describes how learning is a little bit more important than grades for them. And then they also described that ChatGPT, they believed, could reduce humans' need to think for themselves and develop their own original voice. As you can see in this third quote, and kind of taking a step back, we can see that in Participant S's worldview, even though AI might help a student achieve a certain grade, the fact that it could detract from the user's personal development outweighs that grade benefit, resulting in their rejection of ChatGPT as a tool.
So the next person we looked at was participant DD, which we gave the moniker the juggler. So participant DD valued both long-term learning and grades. However, they did not have the capacity to keep both afloat. They wanted to, as they said, they wanted themselves to improve. It's very hard to balance being a student athlete, having extracurriculars, having a social life, and a family life. For them, ChatGPT was a means of getting past and completing this insurmountable goal. However, what's interesting is that their moral compass also wavered because they admitted that they do feel guilty whenever they do use ChatGPT, which indicates cognitive dissonance.
And then participant I, we call the self-sustaining student because they were very like intrinsically motivated and were able to completely work by themselves. Unlike participant D, they have the capacity to balance both of these things. And one thing to note is that participant I used the word lazy 4 times in their interview, which is, a lot. And this is a speech act that is repeated over and over that positions students who use ChatGPT as slackers who don't care, which establishes a strong work ethic as a social good in high achieving academic environment. Then this first quote, President I tells that the ChatGPT not only is this like a symptom of laziness, but also a perpetrator of it. And therefore, ChatGPT is seen as a threat to this work ethic they value, which informs their decision to not use ChatGPT. However, they also admitted that they would likely use ChatGPT if there was a really bad time problem, they just couldn't finish their work in time. And so that kind of hints that even students as ethically consistent as far as I could still succumb to the temptation of ChatGPT under extreme pressures.
So in conclusion, students perceive ChatGPT as a tool to gain agency, such as by obtaining social goods that are valued in their figured world, and by obtaining these social goods by improving their position. Some social goods, the social goods that we identified in this paper was high grades, learning, efficiency, ethics, humanity, and superiority. And these, the pressures were like the underlying factor of everything that formed the storylines, and those storylines made a background for all the positions. And the pressures also emphasized social goods, and these pressures were stemmed from different figured worlds, such as the school or the home.
So one of the biggest limitations was time and logistics. We had a group which would grow and shrink because, because of the different commitments that a lot of different people had. We had a core group who which stayed pretty much constant, but then we also had kind of like people joining in and people who maybe couldn't make it to a few meetings. So kind of coordinating a group was definitely one of the hardest pieces that we had to deal with. But because of that, we kind of like took a little bit longer to kind of pull everything together. But I think the upside of that is that we had more time to really think deeply about what we wanted our research to be. And we hope that perhaps in the future, our insights will be beneficial and a genuine contribution to this field.
As we move into the implications and recommendations section, it's absolutely critical to understand the value that teachers have in students' lives. It's clear that an emphasis on learning and improvement enhances student engagement. But with this, teachers should also ensure that students are understanding how the assignments apply to the actual world and their own future, and this will incentivize authentic learning rather than short-term memorization. There are a few potential curricular design methods that may include increasing the amount of time students have to complete an assignment, or maybe implementing different process learning pedagogies. For instance, segmenting a larger assignment into smaller parts. Below, you'll see that we have a standardized email that has been actually used within our own school system. The reason why this is such an effective email is that it has various points in which it does not blame the student actively. For instance, it says, this is not a definitive claim or an accusation. It also says that this is a standardized email. Furthermore, teachers also justify the criteria in which they deemed whether that deemed their own suspicion, such as saying that there is an AI checker or a document by the document history or the student's own writing sample. Lastly, the email concludes with saying that the teacher is there to work with the student, which is to relieve some of the stress in which such an accusation could incur.
Moving from the individual classroom scale to a bigger scale with general education policy surrounding ChatGPT, the first and foremost thing we would like to advocate is for the awareness of ChatGPT's impact on development, with exploring the different social goods within our high school community, such as learning, ethics, and so on. We hope that our research can bring this awareness to administrative officials so they can use the prioritization of certain social goods to dictate how they come about policy in a way that can help students attain their social goods in a more healthy manner. We also just would like to advocate for an effective use of ChatGPT within the educative setting, such as many students have mentioned, as a tool to facilitate learning. So as a starting point for research would be an example of that. We also thought that it was really important for school districts to develop a certain standard. As of right now, there isn't really a cohesive policy across many districts as to how to manage ChatGPT and generative AI usage in schools, which is why we thought a standardization and some sort of example for people to follow would be a really impactful thing in the educative community. Finally, we discussed disciplinary procedures. As Vivek mentioned, like the first starting point would be individual teachers discussing with their students if they believe the student has been using AI in an inappropriate manner for schoolwork. And should that come to should it come to realize that the student has in fact been abusing the privilege of using AI, then establishing a standardized disciplinary procedure such as temporary suspension at the worst, I think, would be very important to standardize as well.
Thank you so much. We're going to open it now up to any questions.
And a quick heads up that their paper is going to be released mid-May in the qualitative report. Yeah, so feel free to email me as well if anyone would like access to see a PDF of this PowerPoint, or if you have any further questions. But right now we'll open it up to the students.
That was fantastic. Thank you. As fantastic as your writing. So, yes, we invite questions from anyone. I'm sure Dan has one for sure. And I just got a text from Ron, the other co-editor-in-chief of TQR, and he ran into a little bit of a buzzsaw at work, so he wasn't not able to come, but he'll check in with me later. So thank you very much. That was really fantastic. But yes, comments, questions?
I have a question I could start with. Thank you for this presentation. It's so well organized that it was, I was aware of the study because I had talked with you before, but it was fun to see how you put it all together so smoothly. My question has to do with, because you have a big team, a team of classmates, some of you who are here today and some people have gone on, and um, how would you describe the way that you guys get along in doing this study? When there's research projects that involve teams, the dynamics between the team members is really, really important, but oftentimes not discussed. So could some of you characterize how you guys work together as a team?
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of us can speak to this, but I can just start with my own experiences. Obviously, we meet a lot. Meeting 2 times a week for a long time kind of like develops a bond, and all of us have gone really close with each other. We even had like, we've even had like getting food when we got the news that we were accepted at TQR. We all had like a little mini impromptu party within the classroom, but it was such a really good experience getting to know everybody here. And even now, I've gotten closer with a bunch of the sophomores, and we're also able to give them sort of like advice from our own perspectives as seniors, which has been like a kind of a really nice moment, at least for me. Yeah.
So I can speak to the earlier stage of our paper. When we had the huge team of 50 students, at first it would be split within each classroom. A certain group of students would work on, say, the introduction, the literature review, so on. And a problem that arose was because we didn't really have a steady line of communication at first. There would be times where someone would work on the introduction and come back next class to see The other group didn't understand what we had done and changed it to something that they did. So to establish that line of communication, that's where the hierarchy system sort of came in. So there would be group leaders and editors in chief of each class who would communicate with each other on the goals of each section. And after we established that sort of system where certain people had one clear line of communication, then we were able to make the path a lot smoother. I think now that the group has shrunk down a little bit, it's a lot easier to communicate and coordinate ideas, especially because we'll have a lot fewer people working on the same sections at a time. But as Vivek was saying, with the sophomores, they've been extremely mature, extremely dedicated and passionate to learn, which has made the process move a lot smoother than how we were when we were their age.
And I just want to put out a little point that none of this would have been possible without Saisha and Vivek wanting to continue this project. They built this hierarchy. A lot of times, you know, this process emulated a real graduate level process, and managing, you know, somewhere between 20 and 50 people at a time is really, really hard, even for grownups. And a lot of times they would come to me and I said, well, what do you think you should do? Like, you're going to be in this situation 10, 20 years from now. What will you do? And they figured it out through communication, through building systems. They made a Google Classroom and Slack and used technology in ways I didn't even know they could. And made one-on-one connections with the entire collaborative. Additionally, other people took on leadership roles. Rebecca, who's another head researcher, she preferred not to be as much a part of the logistics as far as telling people what to do, whereas Vivek and Saisha would assign roles and assign assignments. But Rebecca, this paper would not have been written without her. I mean, she attended every meeting. She wrote, I mean, wow. And I would say she is equally a head researcher to Vivek and Saisha as well. And so a lot of times it was people like Rebecca really stepping up when other people became too busy. Understandably, like when seniors would become overwhelmed, other seniors would stay like, hey, I can do this.
I just want to, first of all, thank you for your really great work. I think this is really powerful qualitative research, and I think qualitative research is very powerful and very necessary. And one of the things that I think is so powerful about it is that your recommendations are immediately applicable. I'm a senior administrator at our university, and we've spent a year and a half trying to come up with a policy that is appropriate developmentally and ethically and relationally for the students that we're trying to support in their use of this. So your research is going to inform the way that institutions of learning try to work with their students to do this. So thank you for that. I'm also really struck by the idea of the social good and the way that our relational research is also about the greater good. So thank you very much for your work on working together and your high achieving, your future oriented work that you're doing, the good work that you are doing for not only yourself, but the capacity you have to do good for others is a shining light right now. And I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Hey there, I'm Chastity Minton. I'm also at Butler University in the College of Education. So fantastic work, really well done. I made a note that you presented better than some graduate level classes that I was just recently in. So really impressive. My question is, and I don't think that you addressed it in this because it was, you know, you were researching other people. What is your personal view of using ChatGPT?
Yeah, sure, I can go for that. So me personally, don't tell my teachers this, but in certain cases, I do use ChatGPT, especially for just informational stuff. Um, a lot of times it can provide a lot of concise information that is really helpful to understand things because a lot of times in a lecture format class, it's hard for me at least to absorb all the information and apply that in future assignments and everything. But for me at least, ChatGPT has been able to just concisely convey information in a way that I'm able to absorb and apply it in the future. However, I have noticed a lot of times for like physics at least, it gives a little wonky answers sometimes. So I think it's really important to be mindful of that when I use it. But other than that, I don't tend to use it for anything else because I'm of the group who believes in personal growth and learning. So I'm of that group that believes that it could like over reliance on it could hinder my growth as a student.
So I just want to jump in on that real quick. Um, so I think just jumping off of what Matthew said, I think there is sort of a big overstatement of its use in the humanities, because the vast majority of people at our school use it more for the STEM classes, and I think that that is actually the fields where it should be used most, because just AI in general, because for example, if there's a test you're studying for and they give you a bunch of practice questions and the answer key, but the answer key doesn't show how to get to the answer, if your answer doesn't reflect exactly, if your answer is not the same as the answer key, you don't know what you did wrong, or if you don't understand the problem, how to do it at all, if there's no explanation that your teacher provides you, ChatGPT is often a great resource to explain it if you don't understand it and to sort of get to the answer from the answer key. And I think that's sort of the perspective that a lot of students have at our school as a whole. I know I've never used it in a humanities class, but I've definitely used it in STEM classes pretty consistently.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I'd like to speak for the sophomores. We had a discussion about this. We think that, like the internet, generative AI and like ChatGPT isn't going to go away, which is why we think like research like ours is so important to help establish and to help teach and educate people in safely using it so that it doesn't hinder learning and education. We think like the internet of so many different versions and variations has evolved, and it's not something that's going to go away, and people are going to continue to use it, which is why, like I said, our research is so important for establishing boundaries.
I think for me, as the generative AI stands currently, definitely like Ali said, for humanities classes, I just feel like it doesn't cut it. Um, oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. So I think when I've asked before just for funsies to see what the generative AI can do. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have done that. But I feel like when I read through what ChatGPT has written, it honestly just feels very I guess cliche. It doesn't like again, I feel like I have a certain message or personality that I want my writing to have. And when I read through what ChatGPT has written, it just I just cringe a little bit. I just die a little bit inside. So I think it's possible AI may gain some personality in the future, but as it is right now, I don't think I could, in good conscience, put it forth and say, "Oh, this is equal to or better than my."
Just to close this off, I want to offer like a technical viewpoint. So from my computer science background, it's generative AI is also used in a lot of coding things as well. And while a lot of people do end up using it, it's very important to understand what actually is your own and still having the skills to think through the problem. Because oftentimes this can be extrapolated to using it within the classroom as well, but having it get to the answer for you kind of removes that thinking aspect. And later down the line, when you're faced with new issues that you run into, you're not able to understand where those issues came from originally. If that kind of makes sense. Yeah. We can move on to the next question as well. Sorry, be waiting.
Yeah, so Dan put a great question in the chat. He said, with many of you headed for college careers in medicine, engineering, and the sciences, will you continue to explore qualitative research initiatives? So I definitely agree. As someone who has worked as an intern in the more quantitative science medical field, I definitely agree that there is a prioritization of quantitative fields. However, that's why I chose a degree in global public health as opposed to hard sciences, because even though I do want to pursue a career in medicine, um, this project has given me more of a worldview on the importance of ethics and quantitative research, which is very integral to the global public health field, which is why I aim to study a more robust worldview of medicine. And I'm sure many of us can agree that we do really enjoy the qualitative research process and the unique perspectives it gives as opposed to the qualitative research or quantitative that we have been exposed to in schools and academia.
Yeah, I completely agree with Saisha, and I think I also might go into medicine and stuff like that, specifically with like neuroscience and psychology. And in the psychology course that I am taking right now, actually, there is a lot of so we had a unit on just the neuroscience, on the neurotransmitters, on very quant stuff. But I think the what's really great about that class is they also emphasize the way that that's not the whole story, and that there's the quantitative stuff is great, but it sometimes can't capture the full story, especially in terms of like a social cultural lens and the ways that those things will impact people, and it's actually those things are also a very big factor. So I think that I for sure wouldn't want to leave out half of the story in if I go into research or anything like that.
Really like Nan's question
Also,
and my
to add on to this, sorry, sorry.
Okay.
To add on to this, the senior, I mean, though the seniors are at a different like stage than we are, the sophomores are going to continue like the qualitative process. So we are going to be continuing our own like qualitative research, and we've learned so much from this seniors and like just the process like overall. And we definitely think that we are interested in this process as well.
okay to go on for a few more minutes. Okay. First of all, I wanted to I've said this before, but I wanted to make sure you all heard it. You're invited to do your presentation of your study at the next qualitative TQR conference, and we will have two. One is in Florida, that's the face-to-face one, and then there'll be one online. So if you watch for those announcements coming from TQR, we'd love to have you do it. And one of the things that I was most impressed with, and I think that I would love for others to hear about, is your process of analysis. And that was probably the thing that we spent the most time on in terms of writing the paper and meeting together. So, anyways, I would love others to share in that. And just one more thing is maybe just a little bullet point about what you will carry forward in your learning about qualitative research and relational research.
Would you be able to actually one second.
Sorry, my bad. Okay. I guess what I've picked up most upon throughout this process is just a lot of teamwork. I feel like we've garnered a lot of camaraderie in this group. These are people that I all care about, and just the value of teamwork, and then also just the broader view of the importance of qualitative research and just the personal aspect that it brings. It's been very impactful to me for sure. Yeah.
And kind of bouncing off that, like, I think this process we had to digest so many, like, very conceptual ideas, very abstract things. And I think one of the things that helped me most personally was talking through them with my collaborative members. And that kind of taught me like the importance of being able to like talk through like element by element the different aspects of things and kind of to reach a more robust understanding or robust like application. So that's just really eye-opening for me.
Just like echo Caroline, for me, I found that visual formats work a lot better to explain ideas as well. So I did a lot of work with like the figures that we actually use in our paper. And for instance, I was really proud of the methods diagram where we were able to succinctly capture all the different parts of our methods in one picture that people can visually follow. I think that skill of being able to take one thing that you understand or you're trying to understand and explain it in a different way helps like build a broader understanding.
I think there's a question in the chat that's really interesting, asking about what we would recommend in terms of, given the tensions that we discussed in the paper, whether or how ChatGPT could be implemented or whether we should fully embrace it. So I guess my opinion on this is definitely you want to teach some, I guess, technological literacy, if you will, um, sort of to understand the broader picture of the short term or long term benefits or consequences that the technology will have on this student's intellectual development. I think once a student is able to have the perspective to understand the ways that a certain way of using ChatGPT might be detrimental to their the learning process, they might be more conscientious about the way that they use it. But something interesting to go along with that point is I did actually have a conversation with outside of this study, but just like a general conversation, very casual with a professor about AI and sort of like it was really new on the scene when I had this conversation. Um, but what they said to me is that they actually didn't like they said it's here to stay. I'm trying to actually incorporate it into my classroom and in my teaching practices. I think they came up with an assignment, which I thought was really interesting, where they said, I'm having ChatGPT or my students ask ChatGPT to generate some writing, and then I want them to go in and critique ChatGPT's writing and point out how ChatGPT, the weaknesses that they have, that ChatGPT has, or their opinion on the writing that ChatGPT has produced.
Like this sentiment of embracing it's really important. If you guys look at your screens right now, in the bottom bar, you'll see AI companion. So it's everywhere, right? You can't like run from the usage of AI, and it's getting picked up by a lot of people around the world. So having if everybody understands and has the literacy on like how to use it effectively, and that's something we want to promote, not just running away from usage of it.
Yeah, on top of this, sophomores also had a conversation about this as well. And like the seniors had said, we know that it's not going away. So like we've learned in schools, we've learned how to use the internet effectively. We've had health classes even for things that we don't encourage to use or we don't encourage to have. We want to make sure that we still know like how to use it effectively and how to use it safely so that we don't have consequences like hindering your growth and hindering your education.
And I want to, sorry, Angela, you can go
adding
first.
on to that, I think yesterday we were comparing it to, health class in school. Obviously, the usage of AI isn't something that necessarily we want to promote, but we think that, it's really important because it's here to stay. We should, based on research, we should have provisions and, have guidelines for the safe usage of it because it is inevitably going to happen and people are going to use it.
All right, and I want to end on a final note. Like everyone's been saying with this question, at this point, AI is we believe it to be inevitable. At the time when we started this study, OpenAI was sort of the monopolist um, over generative AI, and like that was accessible for users to use at their whims. With now there's competition from other countries, and individual programs such as Zoom or Grammarly have their own AI like tools. So while AI is becoming more and more inevitable, I think it's all the more important for administrators also to take that into account when developing a policy decision. And I think overall, like as we're wrapping things up, thank you guys so much for taking like over an hour of your time to listen to our research. We're really grateful for everything. And again, look out for our research in mid-May and for future works by our continuing class.
Thank you so much. Alexa, any last words?
I just want to reiterate that while I gave them options for frameworks, they read the full books. While I edited, I did not write any of this paper. And while like I could facilitate and supervise, the kids created the hierarchies and the systems and the work. I mean, oh my goodness, the work, all on top of they're facing these pressures as well. And so just a massive thank you to them for just, I think, showing our world in a world that can be quite bleak. The fact that they are the ones that are taking us into the future, and they're critical and they're brilliant and they're clever and witty. And it is just the greatest privilege of my teaching career to teach them. And sophomores, raise your hands. And there's a couple more back there watching. They would like to continue the project, so keep a lookout, because they were talking about using this data and building on it and redoing the process to see in 2025 how do student perspectives differ from 2023.
This has
I think
been
like
awesome.
another heartfelt thank you to TQR, the Taos Institute, everyone, especially for taking a
Yes.
chance on us with the expectations. And Sally and Dan, your help editing, revisions, the many hours spent on calls with us, asking like many questions have been so valuable to us. We had docs and docs and docs of questions. It was amazing. So thank you so much.
Our pleasure. Thank you. And just one last comment. I don't know, did you read Alexa's paper that's going to be published along with the research paper? If not, make sure you get a chance to do that. Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you in Florida or online, and maybe with another paper. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All the best to you,
Thank
graduates.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for coming. And yeah, thank you.
You too.
Congrats,
All the
Lexi.
best.
Thank you. Bye.